Body has what I like to call universal codes or ancestral codes, which are preferred motor plans, preferred movement patterns of how the body anticipates it needs to fire up to prepare for a movement and then in turn carry out said movement. Fake glutes. It's a term I came up with some of my patients who were not adequately and appropriately engaging their glute muscles when they were doing certain tasks, and it was causing typically back pain. So when I evaluated them and had them perform certain movements, I noticed, okay, you're clenching your low back muscles when you're supposed to be using your glutes. And so they had developed what's called a certain motor pattern where anytime the body required glute activity, it occurred from their low back, causing them pain. So I joke, you're using your fake glute, or whenever I see them across the room performing an exercise, I'm like, hey, shut down the fake glute and activate the real one. So what is going on when I say fake glutes? We all, when we move, need to develop what's called motor planning, which is the ability to organize the body's actions, knowing what steps to take and in what order we're going to take them to complete a task. This skill allows us to remember and perform the steps to make a movement happen. When we're first learning skills and learning movement, we are slower, we're not as coordinated, we're not as precise, we're maybe not as efficient, because the body does not have that motor plan solidified. Once a motor plan is solidified, it's on autopilot, we lose that preferred motor plan. It's not as quickly as accessible to us through an injury, trauma, weakness, lack of movement, lack of connection, lack of awareness, lack of just simply not ever practicing that skill. Once you get better and better at performing tasks in ways that you're using a more efficient movement pattern, we start to become more coordinated, and you are going to have a really difficult time coordinating movement when you are not motor planning correctly. So people who want to dance, people who want to, perform better in athletics, in sports, in the bedroom, all need to develop better motor plans. They need to have more access to being able to find what needs to fire up so that you can motor plan, develop motor control, and then develop motor coordination. Then, after all of that is when you can really start building strength and endurance. And so many of us, myself included, will build strength off of faulty movement patterns and off of faulty motor plans, and then we get ourselves into pain and don't understand why, because you claim I'm quote unquote really strong, I have a lot of endurance, when in reality maybe you're carrying out a task and your preferred motor plan is to hold your breath. Maybe you're carrying out a task and your preferred motor plan is, instead of engaging your glute, you're clenching your low back. So yes, you can move 40 pounds in your squat, however, it's all with a low back clench. That's not 40 pounds of moving mass with your glutes. So when you ask that person to cut back on the low back engagement, that person may only be able to lift 10 pounds. And then it becomes a sad day because you thought you could lift 40. In my own experience, it's really an ego thing. At the end of the day, I've had to put my ego aside and say, okay, I cannot squat 40 pounds without clenching my back or clenching my neck or without holding my breath. So I don't have the strength to do that. So therefore, let me train at the 10 pounds, the 20 pounds with the right motor patterns, so then I can take that motor planning and motor control and motor coordination into these more intense strength exercises. One of my favorite parts about physical therapy, it's called neuromuscular re-education, which means reteaching somebody how to find what's called the preferred motor pattern, or putting them in situations movement-wise where you're really breaking down how they're planning for a certain movement. What I like to call universal codes or ancestral codes. Bodies maybe start to develop faulty patterns of movement. If something is tight, if something is weak, if something is shut down, brain may simply not have access to that body part. So we struggle to perform movements that require it. Two examples in my own body are, you can really isolate your pelvic floor, your right side of your pelvic floor, your left side of your pelvic floor. And I noticed that during tasks that would require me to fire up and engage my left pelvic floor, I would always do this clench of my left side of my neck. And so I started calling this my fake pelvic floor. Every time I fire this up, I would realize, okay, there's something faulty at the pelvis that's causing me to clench at my neck. Same thing, I had a lot of low back that was coming into some of my glute exercises and motions and movements that required my glutes. I was getting them from a low back clench, but only on one side. Like one glute, it could fire up in isolation, and the other one was like attached to my low back every time I fired. So in that case, my left low back was my fake glute, as I call it. And so a lot of the solutions that I provide for people are the overactive muscle that's too enthusiastic about engaging. Quiet it down. It can take meditation, it could take a stretch, it could take manual body work, it could take all of those things, but really at the end of the day you have to practice and you have to know what you're practicing. And so that is one thing that I specialize in. From there we can move into the strengthening component of things and find new ways of moving and find new ways of functioning, and usually get ourselves out of back pain and hip pain and even neck pain. I'm going to be going over this in my Holistic Solutions for Pelvic Problems course starting October 3rd, 2020, and early bird pricing ends on September 10th, so get on it. To show you what a stretch looks like for one of my fake glutes, and yours maybe too.